The arena was huge, open to the sky, filled with noise, dust, and fire. Thousands of aliens sat in the stands, cheering and shouting, hungry for blood. A fight was about to begin. And in the middle of it all stood a human alone, silent and calm. His name was Rin. He had no armor, no helmet, no fancy clothes. Just a dark shirt, worn pants, and boots that looked like they had walked across galaxies. The guards had thrown him into the arena as a joke. A punishment, maybe. The aliens called it the Trial of Steel, but it wasn't a trial, it was a public show, a game of death. Across from him stood the champion. She was tall at least 7 feet. Her silver skin shimmered under the twin suns. Muscles wrapped her body like coiled wires. Her black hair was braided tightly, and her long ears twitched with pride. She was a royal warrior, Princess General of the Thurakai. Her name echoed through the crowds like thunder, and in her hand was a glowing blade. The announcer's voice rang through the speakers. The human has no weapon, no skill, and no honor. But let him face the blade of the Thurakai anyway. The crowd laughed. The princess took a step forward. Her voice was cold and clear. "Can't even hold a blade," she said, eyes narrowing. A guard approached Rin with a long alien sword, placing it gently in front of him. It was a ceremonial gesture. They were giving him a chance just for fun, but Rin didn't pick it up. He looked at the blade for a second, then slowly he picked it up, only to drop it at her feet. "Too light for me," he said. At first no one reacted. Then the crowd went quiet. Murmurs spread across the stands. Some laughed nervously. Others just stared. The princess tilted her head, unsure whether he was mocking her, warning her. She gripped her blade tighter. "Fight me properly, human, or die like a coward." Rin didn't move. His hands stayed at his sides. But his eyes never left hers. Calm, focused, like he wasn't in danger at all. Like he had already seen how this would end. The princess growled and rushed forward. Her silver blade cut through the air like lightning, fast, powerful, deadly. But Rin wasn't there. He had already moved. Not with a jump, not with a sprint, just a sidestep, smooth and easy. Her blade missed him by inches before she could turn. He raised his hand and tapped the back of her armor. Not a punch, not a strike. Just a touch. She froze. That move her own style. Her tribe's sacred technique. How did he know it? She spun around and slashed again. Rin ducked, turned, and stepped away. Like his movements were quiet, controlled, like water. He didn't try to hit her. He didn't need to. It was showing her. Something terrifying. She screamed and charged. This time her blade met flesh. A cut across Rin's side, but it was shallow. He didn't even flinch. Then he moved in close, twisted her wrist, and knocked her weapon to the ground. Gasps spread through the arena like a wave. The princess dashed disarmed. She stepped back, breathing hard, sweat running down her neck. "Who taught you that?" she asked. Rin looked at her. His voice was low but clear. "No one you'd believe." She blinked. Rin turned and walked back to the center of the arena. He didn't take her blade. He didn't bow. Just stood there. The crowd began to whisper. Again, louder this time. This wasn't a human slave. This wasn't a fool. This man knew something. Something old. Something lost. The princess picked up her sword. Her pride burned. Her blood boiled. But her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from confusion, from memory, from something deeper. "Who are you?" she asked. Rin gave a small smile. "That depends. Do you want to remember or forget?" That was when the arena gates slammed shut. Not just for show, this was now a death match. No escape. No mercy. The princess raised her blade once more, but this time her eyes weren't full of hate. They were full of questions. And Rin, he just cracked his neck and rolled his shoulders, because the fight was never about the blade. It was about the man who didn't need one. Asterisk, the princess general stared at him from across the arena. Her silver blade trembled, but her grip was tight. Her breathing had changed slower, deeper. The crowd was still. The air itself felt heavy, as if the wind refused to move until one of them struck again. Rin stood with nothing in his hands, not even dust. Yet it was he who looked calm. It was he who made the warriors in the crowd lean forward not to cheer, but to understand. He had no armor, no title, no royal blood, but he had done something none of them could ignore. He had touched a princess. Without dying, and now he had embarrassed her. She stepped forward. "Thirakai blood," she said loudly, "does not forget insult." Rin didn't reply. He didn't have to. She raised her hand toward the elder seated above the arena.
"I witness."
"This," she shouted. "I swear the oath of iron. I will either defeat this human or I will bind myself to him as servant and sword. That is my blood price." The arena exploded with noise. Some shouted in anger, some laughed. Others stood in silence, stunned. This oath was ancient rare, sacred, and dangerous. A royal making it, it's unheard of. But she had no choice now. In Thirakai culture, a warrior who bleeds in public combatant fails to reclaim her honor, must submit or die, and Rin had made her bleed first. The princess drew a second blade from her hip. This one was curved, marked with glowing symbols. A weapon passed down through generations. Forged by her grandmother during the War of Flames. It had tasted the blood of kings, but as she held it, her hand still trembled. She charged, silent this time, without warning. Her strikes were sharp, fast, brutal. Left, feinted, twisted. But Rin moved like he wasn't even fighting. His feet slid across the ground with ease. Every strike she gave was answered by a step away or a block with the edge of his forearm, flick of his wrist, a shift of the shoulder. The blade never touched him. She growled and struck downward with all, her strength enough to split a stone. In half, Rin caught her wrists midair. She gasped. His grip was firm, not violent. He stared at her, not angry, not smug, just watching. Like he saw more than her blade, like he saw her fear. And then he let go. She stumbled back, confused. His moves had no hate, no fire. But they weren't mercy either. They were precision. "Why? Won't you strike me?" she demanded. Rin tilted his head. "Because you're not my enemy. Not yet." That answer made her freeze. What did he mean? The crowd didn't understand, but the princess did. We're deep in her warrior heart. She knew this human wasn't here to win a game. He was here to warn them. "You accepted my oath," she said, chest rising and falling. "I did," Rin answered. "Then if I lose, I belong to you." He nodded once. "Yes, but not as a trophy." "What then?" "As the first to learn the truth." The princess narrowed her eyes. "What truth?" Rin stepped forward. He didn't strike her. He just leaned close and whispered, "Your blades were made for human hands." Her body went stiff. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. That couldn't be true. Her ancestors built their empire on the belief that they were chosen by the stars, born to wield weapons no other race could touch. And yet this human, who should have died in the first 10 seconds, was moving like he'd trained with those weapons his entire life. She stepped back. Breathing hard, Rin turned from her and faced the crowd. "You think I came to win?" he said, his voice reaching every corner of the arena. "But I came to remind you, your past isn't yours alone." Then, without warning, he dropped to one knee. The princess blinked, confused. He raised one hand and pointed at her, his voice like steel. "I accept your oath." Her heart dropped. The crowd erupted again. She didn't hear them. Her own breath drowned out the noise. She had expected to defeat him and walk away stronger. Instead, I'd bound herself to a man who made no threats, and still made her feel like she'd lost everything. The battle was over, but the war, whatever it was, had only begun. And now, she was part of it, bound by blood. To him. The prince's general sat alone in the warrior's chamber beneath the arena. Her hands were wrapped in cloth, not for wounds but to stop the shaking. Her blade lay on the floor beside her, untouched. She had just sworn herself to a human. Her armor, once shining with pride, now felt heavy with silence. She stared at her reflection in a polished piece of obsidian glass. She didn't recognize the woman looking back. Above her, the arena had gone quiet. The crowd had left, but the whispers hadn't stopped. Everyone was talking about the same thing, the fight that never should have happened, and the man who should never have survived. RYNN. A human without armor, without weapons, without fear, and now the warrior princess of the Thirakai Empire
Us.
was bound to him. She closed her eyes and repeated the words of the blood oath silently, trying to find a way to undo them. There wasn't one. The door opened behind her without warning. She reached for her blade. "Relax," a voice said. Calm, soft human. She turned quickly. It was Rin. He stepped into the chamber like it belonged to him, like he wasn't standing in the heart of an empire that wanted him dead. "What do you want?" she asked, standing now. He looked around the room. "Not much of a victory celebration," he said, walking past the fallen blade. "No food, no drink, not even music." "You're lucky I haven't killed you yet," she said coldly. He smiled. "You're lucky you didn't try." She frowned. "I don't understand you." "That's because you were raised not to," he replied. Turning to her, she was silent. Rin walked to the center of the room and sat cross-legged, calm and bothered. He reached into the folds of his shirt and pulled out a small metallic cube. It glowed faintly, with a color she didn't recognize, neither red nor blue. Something ancient, something forgotten. "What is that?" she asked. "A memory," he said. "From a time your empire pretends never existed." He tapped the cube. A small hologram rose from it. Not a map, not a weapon, a symbol. One she had only seen once, years ago, carved into the deepest wall of the royal archive. Her grandmother had slapped her hand and told her never to speak of it again. "You shouldn't have that," she whispered. "No," Rin agreed. "Because no one should. But someone had to remember it." "What does it mean?" Rin looked at her, his face serious now. "It's a name." She frowned. "A name." He nodded. "The true name of your bladesmaker." Her chest tightened. "Our ancestors forged the weapons," she said automatically. "They were gifted the star's fire." "Your ancestors," he interrupted, "stole the design from humans." Her hands balled into fists. "You're lying?" Rin didn't argue. He just let the cube hover and slowly rotate, showing the same ancient symbol again and again. The more she looked at it, the more her stomach twisted, because a part of her already knew it was true. Her people didn't invent the fighting styles, they had only ... inherited them.
Right.
But history had been written by winners. The rest. "The forbidden name," she said under her breath. He raised an eyebrow. "So you do know it?" "I was told never to speak it, never even to think it." "Why?" "Because those who did ... vanished." Rin gave a dry smile. "Now imagine growing up with that name tattooed on your back." She stepped closer. Eyes wide. "You carry the mark?" Didn't answer. Instead, he stood and pulled down the collar of his shirt. There, across his spine, etched into his skin with black ink and old scars, was the forbidden symbol. She staggered back. "This is a trap," she whispered. "If the elders find out, they already know," Rin said calmly. "That's why they want me dead." She stared at him, 1,000 thoughts crashing in her head. "You're a ghost," she said. He nodded once. "I'm the son of one." She sat down slowly. Her knees were weak. The truth wasn't just dangerous, it was impossible. Yet here it stood in front of her, wearing no armor and speaking with no fear. "Why now?" she asked. "Because your empire is about to start a war. It won't survive, and someone has to stop it." "Why you?" Rin looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. "Because I remember what you've forgotten." For the first time in her life, she believed someone more than she feared them. And that was the most dangerous feeling of all. Asterisk. The sun was setting behind the black peaks of Vornok Ridge. The wind howled through broken spires of rock, cutting across the frozen land like blades through cloth. It was here, far from the noise of the empire, that the princess walked beside. The one man she should have feared. Rin didn't speak much. He just moved forward, calm and steady, like he knew. exactly where he was going. The princess kept looking over her shoulder, her long royal cloak tucked tightly, her blade strapped across her back. No guards, no servants, just her and him, and questions. "Why this place?" she asked finally. Rin looked up the slope ahead. "Because this is where your people buried the truth." At the top of the ridge was a stone platform, ancient, weathered. The carvings had faded, but the shape was still clear, a sword laid to rest. The princess slowed down. "I thought this was a myth," she said. "They called it the Broken Temple." "Wasn't broken," Rin replied. It was silenced. They stepped onto the platform together. The dust and snow scattered beneath their boots. At the center was a large stone slab, cracked down the middle. Beside it lay what looked like a sword, half buried in ash and time. But this blade was different. It wasn't silver or gold. It didn't glow. It didn't sing with energy. It looked human. Rin knelt beside it and brushed the dust away. Fingers were gentle, careful. The princess stood over him, her heart pounding. The shape of the sword was wrong by Thurukai standards, short, rough, wide at the base, primitive, but something about it made her feel like a child again. "You know what this is?" Rin said softly. She nodded. They said it belonged to a rebel, a traitor, a murderer of kings. He looked up at her. "It belonged to my great-grandfather." Silence fell between them. She stepped closer, staring at the old metal. It looked dead cold, dull, forgotten. But when she reached out to touch it, her fingers burned. She yanked her hand back, breath sharp. Rin didn't react. Instead, he reached for the sword and lifted it with both hands. The moment his skin touched the grip, the blade pulsed, not with fire, not with light, with memory. The platform shook softly beneath their feet. The princess took a step back, her eyes wide. "You baited it." "It remembered me," he said, holding the sword upright, "because it wasn't made for your people." He turned and held the blade out toward her. "Try again." She hesitated. Then slowly, with a trembling hand, she reached for the hilt. This time, didn't burn, but it didn't welcome her either. The blade stayed cold. "This sword," he said, "wasn't built to kill kings. It was built to protect them. My great-grandfather forged it before your empire rose. He trained your ancestors. He taught them everything until they turned against him." She shook her head slowly. "No, that can't be." He let the blade fall back into the stone. "When your empire couldn't beat our warriors, they erased them. Rewrote the story, changed the names, changed the purpose of the blade. They said we were savages, that we had no honor. But this sword," he tapped the stone, "is older than your royal line." The princess looked down at her own weapon. It had always felt too perfect, too polished. Now it felt fake, then. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. "Because you're not like them." She looked up, startled. "I saw it in the arena," he continued. "You hesitated. You listened. You wanted to understand what you were fighting. That's why you didn't win." She frowned. "Or maybe I wasn't strong enough." "No," he said firmly. "You were too honest." She didn't know if that was a compliment or a warning. He turned away from the stone and began walking toward the edge of the ridge. "What happens now?" she called after him. He stopped. "The Empire will find out I showed you this. They'll call you a traitor. They'll send assassins. Maybe even your own blood." She stared at his back. Then, "Why did you show me?" He turned, eyes dark and tired. "Because the blade remembered me. But if it ever chooses again, it'll be someone like you." She looked at the stone sword one last time. It didn't glow, but it felt heavier now, like it carried not metal, but history. A history that had been buried, and now dug up by a man who didn't need a throne, or even a blade. Only memory. The stars above the capital burned brighter than usual that night. From the tallest tower of the Empire's palace, the Empress watched the sky, her silver robe dragging across polished obsidian floors. She said nothing. She didn't blink. But behind her calm face, thoughts spun like blades. Her daughter, the Princess General, had disappeared, and with her, a human who moved like royalty, spoke like fire, and fought like he had. Nothing to lose. Below her in the throne hall, the Council of Elders stood in silence. The message had arrived at guards dead, the princess spotted climbing Vornok Ridge, and the old symbol found etched into the snow, the forbidden symbol. Empress finally turned. "Send the Bladeborn," she said. There was no debate, no vote, no delay. 12 shadows moved from the far wall silent, armored in black living metal, each one trained in every art of war, each one sworn to destroy anything that carried the forgotten mark. The Empress looked out again at the stars. "If she stands beside him," she whispered, "she stands against us." Far from the capital, deep in a cave below Vornak Ridge, Rin lit a fire with a simple snap of his fingers. The princess sat across from him, her long coat wrapped around her. Her hands were red from the cold, but she didn't ask for warmth. She just stared into the flames. Silent. She hadn't said a word since they left the ancient sword behind. Rin finally spoke. "They'll come for us now. I know. They'll try to kill you first. You're the scandal. Gah. I'm just the match." She looked at him. "You knew all along this would happen." He nodded. "Truth makes liars afraid. And my mother," she said bitterly, "is built from fear." Rin looked at her carefully. "She sent the Bladeborn." The princess flinched. "You've heard of them?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his belt pouch and pulled out a broken mask, cracked, black, and marked with the royal crest. "This belonged to one," he said. "A long time ago." I stared at the mask. "You killed one?" "No," he said. "She gave it to me." The princess leaned forward. Why would she do that? "Because before they were tools of the Empire, they were warriors of truth," Rin said. "My teacher was the first Bladeborn. She trained me after your people left her to die." Now the princess understood. This wasn't just about forgotten swords and stolen history. This was about revenge. No-justice. But before she could speak, a faint sound echoed through the cave, a metal whisper, then another. Rin was already on his feet. "Too late," he said. The cave exploded. Blades cut through. The air, shadow moved like smoke. 12 figures stepped through the darkness, silent, perfect, merciless. The Bladeborn. The princess barely had time to draw her sword before the first strike came. Rin moved in front of her, his bare hands clashing against metal with impossible speed. He twisted a blade from one attacker, dropped him with a single blow, then turned to the next. The princess fought beside him. For the first time in her life, she didn't fight to win a title or honor. She fought to protect something real. But they were outnumbered, outmatched. The Bladeborn didn't bleed. They didn't speak. They only moved as one, until one of them paused. She faced Rin and stepped forward. Her mask cracked just a little. Rin stared. "You," he said. The figure nodded. The princess turned to him, confused. "What's happening?" But Rin didn't explain. He dropped low, swept the legs of 2 assassins, spun, and disarmed a third. Behind him, the masked figure stepped aside. Anne didn't attack. She turned toward the others and raised her hand. "Enough," she said, voice dry like dust. The others froze. The princess looked from one face to another. Why are they listening to her? Rin took a breath. Because she's the one who trained them. The fire flickered. The cave shook, and the oldest Bladeborn removed her mask fully. She was human, her face marked with lines of age, the scar across one eye, but her presence was stronger than steel. The princess stepped back, stunned. "She's—" "Yes," Rin said. "She's the reason your mother fears the past." The older woman looked at the princess. "You don't have much time," she said. "The Empress has already moved to crown your cousin in your place," they've called. "You a traitor. Your name is being erased as we speak." Then we stop it, the princess said, gripping her sword. The old Bladeborn nodded, but not with swords. With proof. What proof? Rin looked at the flame. We show the Empire what it forgot, what it stole. The princess met his eyes, and for the first time, she understood why the blade hadn't chosen her. Yet because the blade waited for the moment she stopped being her mother's daughter, and became her own legacy. Asterisk, the throne room of the Therakai Empire had never been this quiet. All 12 high houses stood in perfect rows beneath the crystal ceiling, their robes glittering, their heads held high. Guards with black halberds lined every wall. Servants held their breath. No one moved, because today, the Empire's sacred weapon, the true blade, would choose its next master. It floated at the center of the chamber, untouched. Forged from a dying star, sealed in a stasis field for generations. It had never bowed to a single hand. Not the Empress, not her forefathers, not even the founders. And yet today, they said the blade would awaken. A lie, maybe, but the ceremony was necessary. The Empress had declared her niece the heir now that the Princess General had vanished. She claimed her daughter had gone mad. Run off with a human, betrayed her blood. The court had believed her until the door slammed open. Gasps filled the room. The Princess General stepped into the hall, blade at her side, head uncovered, eyes clear. Beside her walked the man the Empire feared, Drin. He wore no armor, no rank, only dust-covered clothes and the gaze of someone who had walked through war to arrive here. The Empress stood slowly. You dare step into this hall uninvited? She said coldly. With a traitor beside you, came, the princess said, voice sharp and steady, to let the blade speak. A murmur rippled through the hall. The Empress's fingers twitched. You have no right, she does, said a voice from behind. The old Bladeborn stepped forward from the shadows, mask off, gray hair falling loose across her shoulders. The court stared, stunned. She had vanished years ago, believed dead. The Empress turned pale. You trained our killers, she said. I trained warriors, the old woman replied, until you turned them into tools. The Empress raised her hand to call the guards. But it was too late. The true blade had started to glow. Everyone froze. The blade lifted higher. The stasis field around it cracking like ice. The princess took a step forward. The weapon shimmered, turned, pointed toward her, and then suddenly it twisted away. A hush fell. It turned again, slowly, like a living thing sensing something long forgotten. And it pointed to Rin. The chamber erupted into chaos. No, the Empress shouted, but the blade pulsed with light brighter than the ceiling itself, shot across the air and landed in Rin's open palm without him lifting a finger. Silence crashed. Down again. Even the guards didn't breathe. Rin looked down at the blade. It wasn't alien. It wasn't divine. It was human work, designed to obey truth, not bloodlines. He stepped forward. The blade humming low like thunder waiting to fall. The Empress stumbled back. This is blasphemy, she whispered. No, Rin said. This is memory. She raised her hand. Kill him. The guards surged, but the princess moved first. With one smooth strike, she dropped 3 guards. Not with death, but with precision. Every swing of her blade disarmed, disabled. She wasn't fighting for power. She was fighting for proof. Rin stood still, the blade now silent in his grip. He didn't need to use it. The moment it chose him, the Empire had already lost. The court could see it. In their eyes, fear was turning to doubt, out into belief. The old stories were true. Humans weren't the enemy. They were the origin. The Empress backed up the steps of the throne. You think this changes anything? You think a blade makes you king? I don't want your throne, Rin said. He turned to the princess. But I know who does. The Empress froze. The princess stepped forward. Her voice calm, certain. This empire was built on stolen steel and silent history. But no more. You would betray your own mother. The Empress spat. The princess drew her sword and laid it at her feet. I already did. Rin handed her the true blade. The weapon hummed again, and this time Mitt let her touch it. She raised it toward the court, and every head bowed. Later that night, the princess stood alone in the throne room. The blade rested beside her. The firelight danced along its edges. Rin stepped in, silent. "You should take the crown," she said softly. "I didn't come to rule," he said. "I came to return what was forgotten." She turned to him, her voice quiet now. "Then what will you do?" He smiled faintly. "Leave. There's still more they've hidden." She nodded. "Then go." He looked at the blade one last time. "It chose me, but it stayed with you." She smiled, "Because it knows what I'm becoming." And for the first time in centuries, the empire of the Therakai had a ruler with no fear, only truth. The blade was sealed again, not because it had lost its power, because its power had finally served its purpose. Weeks had passed since the choosing. The empire had not burned. It had not shattered. But it had changed, quietly, deeply, permanently, in the grand square where warriors once marched for war. Now stood statues. One of the princess general, sword raised not in anger, but in remembrance. And beside her, a figure without a blade in hand, without armor on his chest, only winded his coat and a scar over his heart. Rin, but he was gone now. No parades followed him. No ships carried his banners. He left without ceremony, without speech, on a ship older than memory. The princess had watched him go from the highest tower. She hadn't asked him to stay, and that's why he almost did, in the years that followed. The empire looked different, not just on the outside, but inside its people. Children were taught the full history now, the real one, of the warriors who came before the Therakai, of the humans who vanished into legend. Not because they were weak, but because they refused to become weapons. The princess ruled wisely, not with blood, not with blade, but with balance. She didn't erase the old ways. She redefined them. She trained warriors to protect, not conquer. She welcomed other species into the royal guard. She ordered every royal sword to be remade with one symbol carved. Onto the hilt, the forgotten mark. Some called her reckless. Others called her revolutionary. But everyone called her one thing without question: Queen. Still, every year, on the day the true blade had chosen, she walked alone to the edge of the northern cliff, where the stars burned closest to the ground. She would wait for a moment, say nothing, and then walk away. Rin never left a message, but whispers of him traveled between planets like wind through leaves. Some said he was training others quietly, in the shadows, passing on techniques older than the stars. Others claimed he had gone deeper into the outer dark, where ancient machines still slept, to uncover what else had been stolen from Earth's past, and some swore he'd been seen in backwater bars, smiling, telling stories that always ended in the same way. You don't need a blade to be sharp. One night, deep inside a jungle world untouched by cities, a child ran through the trees, laughing. He tripped and fell into a clearing, and stopped. There, sitting by a fire, was a man with tired eyes and hands wrapped in cloth. Rin looked at. The boy smiled and offered a piece of fruit. "Want to learn something dangerous?" he asked. The boy blinked. "Can I tell my parents?" Rin shook his head. "Not yet." The boy laughed and sat down. The fire cracked, and across the galaxy something shifted, not because someone raised a weapon, but because someone remembered why it didn't have to be raised. Back on the capital, the princess stood in the royal hall. A new recruit bowed before her. "I want to be like the bladeless king," the recruit said, trembling with youth. The princess smiled. "You don't become him," she said softly. "You learn why he never needed the blade in the first place." She touched the side of her own sword, the one that once belonged to her people, then to history, and now to her alone. She had mastered it, but she rarely used it because she had learned what no throne could teach. True strength isn't forged in fire, it's found in restraint, and far away. As a sun set on a quiet world with no name, a man sat on a rock, eyes closed. Breathing steady, he heard nothing but the wind, felt nothing but peace. carried nothing but truth. The stories would call him many things: wanderer, teacher, warrior, ghost, but only one title followed him forever: the bladeless king, not because he lacked a weapon, but because he was the only one who had learned to live without needing it.